We all know about those big history-changing moments, right? Well, this is one of them. A battle that forged an empire, created the very first Roman emperor. But what if the story we all learned is missing a key player? And I'm not talking about some secret general or a hidden queen. I'm talking about a law of physics.
Okay, picture this. It's September 2nd, 31 BCE. You're off the coast of Greece. The legendary Battle of Actium is about to kick off. You've got Mark Antony's gigantic fleet facing off against his rival, Octavian. The whole empire is on the line. And then, something really weird happens. Antony's ships, they just stop. They don't move. For hours, they're just sitting there, dead in the water. So the question is, what on earth could paralyze a fleet that was supposed to be completely unstoppable?
And look, this isn't some small footnote in a history book. This is a massive historical anomaly. I mean, the battle that's going to create the Roman Empire starts with a pause, a really long 3-hour pause. It's just baffling. To really get how strange this is, we got to look at the two sides that we're about to go at. So, in one corner you've got Antony's fleet. Think of them as the heavyweights. I'm talking massive ships, these decaremes. People at the time called them floating castles and cities. And the key thing here is they had a really deep draft, so their hulls went way down into the water. In the other corner you have Octavian ships. These are the lightweights, smaller, quicker, more nimble triremes with a shallow draft. On paper, this should have been a total knockout. Antony's raw power should have just crushed them. So check out this timeline of events. At dawn, everyone's lined up. It's go time. You're expecting this immediate, brutal clash, but crickets. Nothing. 3 hours go by. The historian Plutarch even wrote that Octavian was just staring, totally confused, thinking Antony's ships must have dropped anchor or something. It's only around midday, when a sea breeze starts blowing, that Antony's ships finally start to move. So, what was going on for those 3 hours?
For like 2,000 years, we've basically had two main stories to explain this. And honestly, both of them are way more about spin and storytelling than they are about, science. The first one, it was a straight-up propaganda war.
Okay, so the first explanation is pure political spin, and Octavian was a master at it. He basically ran one of the best PR campaigns in history. His goal was to make Antony look like he wasn't even a Roman anymore, but some kind of foreign enemy. The historian Cassius Dio wrote down the talking points. Antony wasn't Roman, he was Egyptian, a slave to that woman, Cleopatra. The whole story was that he'd been so corrupted by her that when it came time to fight, he just chickened out.
But then there was this other explanation, a much weirder one. This was the story that sailors would whisper to each other, the one that got written down by guys like Pliny the Elder. It was a legend. They said Antony's main ship was literally being held in place by some kind of supernatural creature. They called it the shipholder.
And this creature had a name, the Echenes. It was supposed to be this small fish with a really weird sucking disc on its head. And the legend was that this tiny fish could just attach itself to a ship and stop it cold. We're talking against the power of hundreds of rowers and a full sail. Sounds like magic, right? A convenient little fairy tale to explain why you lost. But what if it wasn't?
And that's where we get to a totally new way of looking at this. We're going to hit pause on the politics and the myths for a second and jump into the world of modern science. Because a recent research project decided to look at this whole battle again, but not by reading old books. No, they used oceanography and fluid dynamics.
So scientists figured out that the biggest clue wasn't what was happening on top of the water, but what was happening underneath it. This map here shows the depth of the Umbrician Gulf, which is where the battle started. And check this out. The entrance is this narrow, almost fjord-like channel, and it's shockingly shallow. We're talking an average of just 2.5 meters deep, right where Antony's fleet was sitting. For his giant deep-draft castle ships, yeah, that's a really big problem.
And that problem has a name. It's called wave resistance. Basically, it's all the energy a ship has to use just to push water out of its way so it can move. Now, out in the deep ocean, that's all pretty normal. But in shallow water, whoa, something totally different happens. The water can't get under the ship's deep hull easily, so it gets all squeezed up around the sides. This creates these huge waves that actually push back against the ship, acting like a giant brake. And this graph, this right here, is the scientific smoking gun. The bottom line, that's the wave resistance for Octavian's shallow ships. See how it stays nice and low? Totally manageable. But those top lines, that's Antony's fleet. And just look what happens. The moment they try to speed up, the resistance just skyrockets. It hits what is basically a vertical wall. They were literally trying to row through a virtual wall of water. So just how big of a deal was this? Get this.
At the exact speeds they needed to build up for a ramming attack, Antony's ships were facing up to 10 times the resistance that Octavian's ships were. So it wasn't incompetence. It wasn't that they lost their nerve. It was physics. They were physically unable to get going. They were just stuck.
Okay, so we've got our science, right? Problem solved. But what about that weird mythical fish, the echinies? Well, this is where the whole thing goes from interesting to absolutely incredible. This is where the myth and the science finally come together.
Just look at this. On the left, that's a computer simulation of the wave pattern that a deep ship makes in shallow water. It's this weird, ribbed, almost suction cup-looking shape. And on the right, that's the head of the echinase fish, the mythical shipholder. I mean, come on, the resemblance is just stunning. It's unbelievable.
So here it is, the big reveal. The myth wasn't magic at all. It was a metaphor, a perfect, almost poetic metaphor for a real thing that was happening. Think about it. Ancient sailors felt their ships being held back by something. They looked over the side and saw this weird suction cup-shaped wave clinging to the boat. So they came up with a story to explain it. They were literally describing a ghost in the machine, a physical ghost in the water.
You know, this discovery does more than just solve a 2,000-year-old mystery. It actually forces us to rewrite a huge moment in history. It turns out that physics wasn't just on the sidelines watching this battle. No, it was a main character in the story of how the Roman Empire was born.
So, let's wrap this up. What have we learned here? Well, first, the Battle of Actium wasn't won or lost on tactics alone. It was decided by physics. That shallow gulf was basically a natural trap for Antony's huge ships. It literally paralyzed them. And maybe the coolest part? We've seen how an ancient myth, something easily dismissed, can actually be a spot-on description of a real scientific phenomenon.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. For centuries, the legend of the shipholder was just laughed off as folklore. But it turns out it was a story about fluid dynamics all along. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other myths and legends from history aren't just tall tales, but are actually eyewitness accounts of science that we're only just now starting to figure out?